Adam and Eve's first two children are named Cain and Abel. Cain was the oldest. He was also the first jealous man on the face of this earth that is noted, and he's also the very first murderer of all humanity. The other one was Abel, the younger brother, and it's Abel who I want to talk to you. I have some thoughts about him in regards to the very fact that God honored him in Hebrews chapter 11, his great and famous hall of fame of faith people that he listed there. Abel is the very first one that's mentioned. In verse 4 of chapter 11, it says, by faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than his brother Cain, by which he obtained, that's important right there, by his faith he obtained a promise from God. He obtained a witness of God. He obtained a mark from God. He obtained a witness that he was righteous. God testifying, not just the words of a book, but God testifying of his gifts, and by it, his faith, he being dead yet speaketh. Now, of course, that reference of him yet speaketh was referring to his blood crying out from the ground when Cain was exposed as the murderer, when he asked the question, when God asked him, where's your brother? And he says, am I my brother's keeper? And of course, we are our brother's keepers. We're always supposed to be our brother's keeper. But anyways, the thoughts on Cain here is that most scholars would pretty much agree that or assume that the more excellent sacrifice that Abel offered was a blood sacrifice as opposed to a grain or harvest sacrifice. Now keep in mind that Cain was not doing wrong by being a tiller of the ground and the land. Matter of fact, that was one of the first commandments that God had given to Adam and Eve when he created them. He said, have dominion over the earth. And he placed them in the garden. He told them to take care of the garden. So Cain was not doing the wrong thing. He might have been doing the best of the two things that God wanted him to do. But Abel was a keeper of the sheep and cattle out in the field. And when they brought their offering to God, Abel offered a blood sacrifice and Cain offered a grain sacrifice. Now on the surface, we might assume that the greater sacrifice is based upon what material or what substance you bring forth to God. And to some extent, maybe that does apply. But I think there's a hidden agenda here in what God was trying to say in regards to the more excellent sacrifice. I think there's a more excellent sacrifice than just choosing between blood or vegetables. And that is the attitude of your heart. And the key here is in Genesis chapter 4, verse 7, when God accepted and appreciated Abel, the younger brother's sacrifice, and then he looked at Cain, and Cain's countenance became sad, and he wasn't smiling, he wasn't cheerful, there was no exultation in him. And in the King James, it goes on to say that at the end of that verse, to rule over it, and in the footnote in the King James, it says, resist sin. Now I want to read to you verse 7 from two different translations. One, a literal Hebrew translation that takes the words of the Hebrew and gives them the specific meanings, and then a contemporary English one. And I think it'll make a clearer point that the sacrifice that God is looking for from us is the sacrifice from our heart, not just the material substance that we offer. In the literal translation, it says this: if you do well, Cain, is there not exultation? And if you do skillfully, or if you do not skillfully, I like that, do not skillfully, sin is crouching at the door, and your desire is toward you. It's all about you. You're thinking about yourself. You're bringing your offering to God, thinking you're going to get some high praise from God. You're going to give more money in the offering basket or something, and you think you're better than everybody else. The attitude of the heart is very important. He said, and your desire is toward you, and then he says, you should rule over it. There he's talking about his desire, his selfishness. Now, the contemporary translation says this: if you had done the right thing, Cain, you would be smiling. You'd be happy. But you did wrong. You did what you did for you and for yourself. Rule over yourself, or your self-centeredness. And I think, my friends, that's the more excellent sacrifice that we should be offering to God. It's not just the material substance, not how much money we give, above 10% or 50% or 100%, or promises that we make and vows that we make to God and keep those promises. But what we offer to God from the heart is also extremely important, and I think even more important. And I think the key in regards to Abel here was the very first man honored by faith, the thing that he overcame The thing that was more pleasing to God than anything is he ruled over his self-centeredness. He ruled over himself. That is our biggest obstacle in this world. The Bible says if we come to Christ, we must die to ourselves and let Christ live on the inside of us. The original sin of Adam and Eve projected and initiated selfishness and self-centeredness into mankind. It became a poisonous disease to us today. And I just want to encourage you, we all feel self, we all have ambitions. Make sure your ambitions line up with God's will. Do everything you can every day of your life to try to remove yourself from where what you want, and replace it with God. That's the very first obstacle we have to rule over. If you want to conquer sin, you got to start with getting yourself out of selfishness and self-centeredness. That is a more excellent sacrifice. You have a great day. God bless.